The king told his troops, "I am going out with you." But his men objected strongly. "You must not go," they urged. "If we have to turn and run, and even if half of us die, it will make no difference to Absalom's troops. They will be looking only for you. You are worth 10,000 of us, and it is better that you stay here in the town and send help if we need it." David wanted to go out with them, but they said no. They're only looking for you. If you die, this whole resistance doesn't matter. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Okay, so we're at 2 Samuel 18. David's on the run from his son Absalom, who has formed a rebellion against him. Absalom is basically going to throw the entire army of Israel at David. But it did give David a little bit more time to retreat, maybe find a stronghold elsewhere, because it took time to get all those troops together. But now Absalom's trying to track him down and make sure that at least David ends up dying so that his claim to the throne isn't opposed. But keep in mind, they are still father and son. So, like, there's a bit of, possible tension, stress, or maybe even, at least on David's part, not necessarily wanting Absalom dead, even though he's doing all this. But that's the current situation. David has managed to get to a town called Mahanaim. He's welcomed warmly by multiple different people there. So it seems like that's probably right around where he's gonna, try and muster a defense against Absalom. So, here we go. 2 Samuel chapter 18. David now mustered the men who were with him and appointed generals and captains to lead them. He sent the troops out in 3 groups, placing one group under Joab, one under Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and one under Ittai, the man from Gath. The king told his troops, "I am going out with you." But his men objected strongly. "You must not go," they urged. "If we have to turn and run, and even if half of us die, it will make no difference to Absalom's troops. They will be looking only for you. You are worth 10,000 of us, and it is better that you stay here in the town and send help if we need it." "If you think that's the best plan, I'll do it," the king answered. So he stood alongside the gate of the town as all the troops marched out in groups of hundreds and of thousands. And the king gave this command to Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, "For my sake, deal gently with young Absalom." And all the troops heard the king give this order to his commanders. Alright, I will pause there. Alright, so yeah, David's ready to, defend himself and his men, and, because they kind of can't keep running forever. Now that they've found what seems to be a reasonably defensible spot, they might as well, form their counterattack. So he appointed generals and captains. Hebrew says commanders of thousands and of hundreds. Same kind of deal, just said a different way. So yeah, Joab was generally speaking the main commander of David's armies. Abishai was his brother, so also in a high position. Ittai was someone from Gath who had brought some troops that, despite being Philistines, they were loyal to David because of previous things that had happened. David actually lived among the Philistines for a little while. People from Gath definitely knew of his military might. I'm pretty sure Gath had actually been conquered by David at that point, and so I guess these men were wanting to be loyal to the one who they saw as the actual king of Israel. David wanted to go out with them, but they said no. They're only looking for you. If you die, this whole resistance doesn't matter. So, when it says you're worth 10,000 of us, that's as in 2 Hebrew manuscripts and some Greek and Latin. Most Hebrew manuscripts read, now there are 10,000 like us. Saying that there are not 10,000 like David. So it gets similar meaning, just a slightly different way of saying it. Because, I mean, what's 1 in 10,000 compared to 1 of 1? Is kind of the way that would be understood. So the troops march out. He asks his commanders to, quote, deal gently with young Absalom, because Absalom's still his son. He doesn't necessarily want the worst to happen to Absalom, even though Absalom's doing all this stuff against him. But we'll see what happens. Verse 6. So the battle began in the forest of Ephraim, and the Israelite troops were beaten back by David's men. There was a great slaughter that day, and 20,000 men laid down their lives. The battle raged all across the countryside, and more men died because of the forest than were killed by the sword. During the battle, Absalom happened to come upon some of David's men. He tried to escape on his mule, but as he rode beneath the thick branches of a great tree, his hair got caught in the tree. His mule kept going and left him dangling in the air. One of David's men saw what had happened and told Joab, I saw Absalom dangling from a great tree. I'm going to pause there for a sec. So 20,000 men wound up dying in this bit of fighting. Seemingly more just from the environment than from the actual fighting. But it says 20,000 men. It doesn't say how many of them were from which side. But you would think it's more of the Israelite troops that died, since they were the ones beaten back by David's men. So Absalom comes across some of David's men. He doesn't want to die, because otherwise his rebellion is done for, and he obviously can't claim the throne. And if he didn't have too many other troops there with him at that moment, he might have just wanted to go around and try and find somewhere else to engage or command his men. There's a note where it says his hair got caught in the tree. Hebrew reads his head. Same general gist. I mean, it would certainly be easier for him to get caught by his hair, because otherwise you're coming across some kind of situation where it's like his head has to get like wedged between branches or something like that. That seems a little less likely than, you know, something like getting a piece of his hair and then like catching it and anyway. The point is, he's left there hanging, dangling by his head, hair or not, from this tree. One of David's men sees this and reports it to Joab. Then we get to verse 11. Was he a Nazirite? I don't recall reading anything that said Absalom was a Nazirite, so I'm not going to make that claim. Him being a Nazirite would have made it more likely for his hair to be quite long. So, maybe not. But since some of the original Hebrew read his head, the way in which he got caught in the tree, I don't think is super important. If it was by his hair, it does make it a little more likely he was a Nazirite, which was a certain, added dedication to the Lord. But for the story purposes, it's not a super important detail. Interesting to think about, though. So one way or another, he's caught in this tree. Okay. So verse 11. What? Joab demanded. You saw him there and didn't kill him? I would have rewarded you with 10 pieces of silver and a hero's belt. I would not kill the king's son for even 1,000 pieces of silver, the man replied to Joab. We all heard the king say to you and Abishai and Ittai, for my sake, please spare young Absalom. And if I had betrayed the king by killing his son, and the king would certainly find out who did it, you yourself would be the first to abandon me. Enough of this nonsense, Joab said. Then he took 3 daggers and plunged them into Absalom's heart as he dangled, still alive in the great tree. 10 of Joab's young armor-bearers then surrounded Absalom and killed him. So, yeah, there's the death of Absalom for you. Now, Joab, based on previous moments that, we read throughout this book, Joab seems like he might have been a little bit of a hothead, or at least, that he wasn't afraid of going against the king's advice if he thought that it would have been better to do so. So he's probably thinking, well, shoot, we kill Absalom, that quells the rebellion, and we can get back to how things were. The other soldier or whoever who initially found Absalom was like, we all heard what the king said. I didn't want to disobey the king. But Joab's like, whatever, I'm going to go and kill him anyway. Because, that certainly seems like it's the better thing to do for the broader situation. So Joab told that man he would have rewarded him with 10 pieces of silver and a hero's belt. Hebrew says 10 shekels of silver. Shekels were at least one of the more common currencies in Israel back then, at least. And the value of it would have been probably determined more so by the weight and maybe the material that it was made of. So 10 shekels might not have necessarily been 10 individual pieces of silver, because they kind of, shekel was probably more so the value of it, which was associated with the weight. I don't know. Details. But, the major point is that, Joab would have rewarded this guy had he killed Absalom. But then the guy comes back with, I don't care how much you would have paid me. You could have given me 1,000 times what you just... No, 100 times what you just said, and I wouldn't have done it. Because the king said, don't kill Absalom. Yeah, Hebrew says 1,000 shekels. So, similar note there. But, again, Joab goes ahead and kills Absalom anyway. He specifically stabs Absalom's heart, and then 10 other young men, it says, surrounded him and killed him. Doesn't say how, but he did for sure. Okay, verse 16. Then Joab blew the ram's horn, and his men returned from chasing the army of Israel. They threw Absalom's body into a deep pit in the forest and piled a great heap of stones over it, and all Israel fled to their homes. During his lifetime, Absalom had built a monument to himself in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to carry on my name. He named the monument after himself, and it is known as Absalom's monument to this day. Whether or not that actually still exists today might be a different matter, but at least, the day that this would have initially been read, that was the case. So, victory for David's army, it seems. And I'm guessing they hide Absalom's body to make it more, or make it less likely for David to find it and maybe figure out what happened. But Absalom didn't have a son, therefore he didn't have any descendants to potentially claim the throne after him. And then we get to verse 19. Then Zadok's son Ahimaaz said, Let me run to the king with the good news that the Lord has rescued him from his enemies. No, Joab told him. It wouldn't be good news to the king that his son is dead. You can be my messenger another time, but not today. Then Joab said to a man from Ethiopia, Go tell the king what you have seen. The man bowed and ran off. But Ahimaaz continued to plead with Joab, Whatever happens, please let me go too. Why should you go, my son? Joab replied. There will be no reward for your news. Yes, but let me go anyway, he begged. Joab finally said, All right, go ahead. So Ahimaaz took the less demanding route by way of the plain and ran to Mahanaim ahead of the Ethiopian. So Joab probably wanted to give David a sugar-coated version of what happened, not mentioning Absalom's death. Ahimaaz still wants to tell him the truth. And just keeps insisting until Joab finally caves and says, Fine, go. Like, this is not going to be good news like you think it will be in David's eyes. But, fine, go. You've bothered me enough. But yeah, because Ahimaaz starts off saying he thinks it'll be good news. But Joab realizes he's like, David's not going to want to hear that his son's dead. This is not actually good news like you think it will be to David. But yeah, Ahimaaz wants to tell him anyway. And eventually he gets that permission. Okay, verse 24. While David was sitting between the inner and outer gates of the town, the watchman climbed to the roof of the gateway by the wall. As he looked, he saw a lone man running toward them. He shouted the news down to David, and the king replied, If he is alone, he has news. As the messenger came closer, the watchman saw another man running toward them. He shouted down, "Here comes another one." The king replied, "He also will have news." I mean, it's maybe easier to imply that from just the first guy. Knowing that about the second one too, little less obvious, but, you know, it's not... It's pretty clear that it's not like, you know, people trying to come and attack. Because it's just two individual guys. How much of an attack are they going to put up on their own? So I guess because of that, David figures, okay, they're coming with news. Verse 27, we get the watchman speaking. "The first man runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok," the watchman said. "He is a good man and comes with good news," the king replied. Then Ahimaaz cried out to the king, "Everything is all right." He bowed before the king with his face to the ground and said, "Praise to the Lord your God, who has handed over the rebels who dared to stand against my lord the king." "What about young Absalom?" the king demanded. "Is he all right?" Ahimaaz replied, "When Joab told me to come, there was a lot of commotion, but I didn't know what was happening." "Wait here," the king told him. So Ahimaaz stepped aside. Okay, so far, Ahimaaz is not giving details of Absalom dying. We'll, I guess, see what the man from Ethiopia says. I mean, I would assume he was told to give, like, kind of the sugar-coated version. Either that, or he's going to tell the truth and, you know, it'll not have, I don't know, maybe it'll seem a little better or more formal. I don't know. It might seem a bit less personal and thus perhaps a bit less sad coming from this Ethiopian man. But let's see what he says. Verse 31. Then the man from Ethiopia arrived and said, "I have good news for my lord the king. Today the Lord has rescued you from all those who rebelled against you." "What about young Absalom?" the king demanded. "Is he all right?" And the Ethiopian replied, "May all of your enemies, my lord the king, both now and in the future, share the fate of that young man." The king was overcome with emotion. He went up to the room over the gateway and burst into tears. And as he went, he cried, "Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" So, the Ethiopian does kind of tell David in a way that Absalom died. It's kind of implied, at least, by him saying, "May all of your enemies share the fate of that young man." So he didn't say it outright, but it's kind of implied by that. So, unsurprisingly, David is saddened at the news of his son Absalom dying. So, yeah. Note right here. Verse 1833 is numbered 19:1 in the Hebrew text. Which probably just means it might end up being thematically relevant to the start of the next chapter, but we're not going to get into that just yet. So, yeah, David's men are victorious, Absalom dies. So, because of Absalom dying, what would have been good news of just a general victory saddens David because he hears that his son is dead. But that's all we get for 2 Samuel 18. Okay, so whether or not the war is entirely over, David's side definitely seems to have gotten a significant victory here. Absalom's dead, so his claim to the throne obviously is gone along with it. David is still kind of sad because it's his son that died, but it might be kind of better in the long term, at least for his ability to rule as king and continue his dynasty that he was promised by God. So yeah, that's kind of where things are at for now. We'll pick up with that in the next chapter. As always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube, and that'll help you keep updated with the latest videos that I post. Look down in the description for info on social media pages and ways to find and follow those. Also, feel free to go to my supporter page, which is linked down there, and help out in whatever way you feel like, whether it's just a one-time gift or a monthly membership. Either one helps out. And of course, below the description, leave comments with any thoughts that you have related to this video, other Bible-related questions, whatever thoughts you have. So that's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.